Hello, this will be part 7 in the series Hermetic America. And before we go to Illinois and Chicago and Springfield in Illinois, we're going to go back to something, a place I touched on earlier, and that's Iowa and Des Moines, Iowa, where the state capitol building is located. Now, Iowa is a very interesting place in regards to the Hermetic Code. There are more than a few pointers to this, but this ultimately will lead us back to Chicago. And so we have the Iowa State Capitol building in Des Moines. Once again, it's one of these architecturally beautiful buildings of this very beautiful form of architecture. But so the measurements, the symbols and so forth. So for instance, the state seal of Iowa, once more we see the red cap, the Phrygian cap, the Liberty cap, which is a standard across across America, but you'll find it in other places. French Revolution, but actually goes back to ancient times. It's a symbol of a freed slave, but it also has earlier, especially connected to Mithras. But in Des Moines, we see the sphere within sphere sculpture by Arnaldo Pomodoro. These are one of these features that highlights very important cities, the Vatican, New York, amongst other places as well. But there's also a very strong Masonic presence in Iowa as well, including the library there, which is one of the most extensive libraries in there. Mason City, Iowa, formerly Masonville, exactly as the name connects to, and well, the spirit of Mercury, one of the sculptures there, Mercury in Roman, Hermes in Greek, Hermetic code, Hermes, Hermetic. Though the Iowa State Capitol building at 3,300 inches, 33, very important. If you're even slightly familiar with this, you'll now understand the meaning of 33. But the importance of it is that it was the architects were John C. Cochran and Alfred Pickenard. Alfred Pickenard was migrated to America as part of the Icarian movement, which was basically a utopian society, and as with all these utopian societies, it voluntarily disbanded because, well, utopia is a dream. Now, but why that's important is because the same architects were responsible for the Illinois State Capitol in Springfield, Illinois. That's the capital city, it's not Chicago. And just as with all these buildings, the symbols, the architecture, but especially the measurements is loaded with the Hermetic code. It's there to be measured, it's there to be tested, it's repeated across. Now, once more, like as I detailed it in earlier videos in this series and other standalone episodes, other series, it's the same method is happening again now. Just a reminder, each of these buildings are unique. They're not copy-paste, they're all different, yet they will continue with the same pattern and well, the same small sets of measurements in them. Sometimes a height, sometimes a width, sometimes they're inside of a building, for instance the Senate chamber or the Chamber of Reps. But interesting point about this building was in 1944 the original cornerstone was found buried underneath the stairs. Now, there are a few rumours in regards to it. So, for instance, because it was cracked, which it seems to have been, whether it was by natural forces or whether by deliberate action. But there are rumours in regards to it. Firstly, that people were upset that it was laid by Masons. All the cornerstones were laid by Masons. Or that the governor, Attorney General, was whose name was on that stone, was an atheist, and that somehow upset people. Again, these rumours around there, but if you've seen this series or other ones, Masonic cornerstone ceremonies, very, very important. But a very interesting feature in regards to it to begin with is the proportions. Essentially, well, it's a whole number, the square root of 2. Now, that in itself directly connects to one of the most probably the most important Masonic symbol, and that's the compass and the square. The same set squares that you would have seen in school, the drawing tools, we get the 45, 45, 90-degree triangle. However, the square root of 2 is also very important in equal temperament music. So there's a lot of this about 432 versus 44 in music. I can't comment too much on it. However, 440 is, well, a very beautiful number for many respects. Okay, but anyway, here we see just a screenshot from Wikipedia in regards to equal temperament music. Now, especially in the row just right of center, these proportions that you see there are the same, but you'll see repeated in all these other buildings. Again, I haven't spoken about this in the others, but again, if you just apply this set to what I've done previously, it'll all pop up. But why is 440 so important? Well, in the fourth dimension, between the fourth and the fifth, and again, if you're familiar, you would see that there are more than a few connections in there. So a standard concert pitch music of 440, in my own humble belief, it's not some sort of, well, there's a lot of beautiful reasons for that to be there. Whether it's superior to 432, I cannot comment. Music theory, music's not my thing, but there are some very, very good reasons for it to be set at 440. Now, the same architectural team, again, so in the Iowa State Capitol, 3,300 inches high, and again you'll find this repeated, but for instance, the same harmonics, what we have is a particular set of measure which will encode a set of very beautiful proportions, very beautiful numbers. So for instance, 135, well, to begin with, that's the inside angle of an octagon. Now 135 again is a very lovely number, especially connected to 133, but even in Kepler in regards to astrology / astronomy in regards to, well, okay, 27, well, again, if you've seen the previous videos, you'll see this is a repeated theme. For instance, in binary, it's a palindrome. It's a lovely number across so many scales. 27 lunar mansions connecting to the sidereal month, or the 28th day, and menstrual cycles, for instance. Now, at 540, that's the sum of the interior angles of a pentagon. 108 degrees, 108, hugely important, times 5, you get 540, but it's also 54 degrees and sine will bring us to the golden ratio, and as we've always, we'll find especially dimensions of the sun, earth and moon, for instance here the moon, and furlong in the Doric scale. So we have Doric, Ionic, Samian and Cremona basically being the most important of these measure systems. On Pythagorean tuning, B is 486 and 648. Sun, moon, 6,480 years per Platonic season. Apothecaries' weights just happens to blend lovely with so-called modern metric dodecahedron, 6,480, the same number. So geometry, astronomy, well, weights and measures. This is how the pattern works. It's harmony, bringing things together and having multiple points of connection. So, for instance, on the Royal Egyptian scale, Old Kingdom, Royal Egyptian, 6,600 fingers on that scale. Now we'll have a look further. For instance, the number 66 is very important throughout some other structures in Chicago. Also the street plans, but 66 dimensions of the moon and the earth, the weight of the moon, the speed of the earth around the sun at its slowest point, 66,000 miles per hour, at its fastest point, 108,000 kilometers per hour. The allegedly modern metric system is anything but that. Now, according also to the best measures at the moment, because we've only been measuring it for a relatively short time, but the solar system moves up and down, and that's on a 66 million year cycle. Also, 66 feet is 1 Gunter's or surveyor's chain. Now, Edmund Gunter was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth, contemporary of John Dee, to develop what's now one of the defining measures of our modern world, of our cities, of so many other points. and that's the 66 feet or 792 inch Gunther's chain. Now the Gunther's chain is divided into 100 links, and each link is 7.92 inches. 792, I've looked at that, we'll look at it more in, again, we'll have a look at it again, but whether it's, well, time, speed, weight, all of these blend together at these numbers, and that's why they're so important. It's hidden in plain sight, it's a beautiful system. The usual suspects like Ike, Jones and Dice, yeah, they're so full of baloney, it's cringeworthy, because anything that's sort of slightly related to this is somehow satanic or whatever. No, it's a beautiful system, it's a beautiful scale, it encodes knowledge, and those who deny it are denying knowledge, and in inverted commas, the satanic ones themselves. But I don't want to focus on snake oil merchants. I want to focus on people who talk truth and encode truth, and Daniel Burnham is one of the leading figures. Basically, he was the leading figure in the City Beautiful movement, which was a school of architecture and arts which flourished late 1800s, early 1900s. Very important figure, not just in Chicago and also Washington, for instance, Union Station, but he also he was the architect who redesigned the Washington Mall. So the Washington Mall as we see it now. But if we go back previous series I did on New York, he was also the architect of the Flatiron Building. Daniel Burnham, very interesting figure. He would take a long time just to talk about himself, but you'll see the same themes repeated throughout. Now, what's also important about Daniel Burnham, especially in regards to the, Chicago, was that he was the architect of the Masonic Temple building there, and we'll have a look at that a little bit further, but it's there is no record of Daniel Burnham being a Mason, and that seems to be a trait, especially in regards to Scottish Rite cathedrals. But the important thing here at the moment is that Daniel Burnham, amongst many others places, was responsible for the street plan of Chicago. So following the Great Fire, there was a lot of redevelopment. For Australians, Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney, or Marion Griffin, were also students of this particular period in these particular schools, which emerged from the Chicago School of Architecture and the redevelopment that happened after the Great Fire. But very important feature about Daniel Burnham's design was the 66 feet wide street plan. So not just some important buildings, but the street plan himself has his signature on it. Now, as an example, where else did Daniel Burnham touch? Well, apart from doing a lot of design work in the street plans and buildings in regards to Washington, he was Detroit, Cleveland, Winnipeg, Chicago, Denver, Indianapolis, San Francisco, and many others were touched directly by Daniel Burnham or by the wider City Beautiful movement to which he was a leader. So if you're living in America, Daniel Burnham has probably defined the streets that you walk on, and the lifestyle that you lead has been a direct result of this man's influence. And by his particular method, using the Hermetic code, he has written into your street plans a whole system of knowledge. Now, what's important about 66 feet wide streets, apart from 66 feet being one Gunther's chain or surveyor's chain, is that, especially in Chicago, so the standard carriageway is 42 feet wide. Now, there is a slight variation on that, but that's the same plan that Governor Lachlan Macquarie installed here in Australia. And again, so Australia has been touched by this method, but this is not about Australia, this is about America and the 66 feet wide street plan, which again touched so many other cities. So 42 feet wide carriageway, 12 foot sidewalks. Now, this connects to the Gunther's chain, and so 66 feet is 792 inches. So, the Earth, the solar system, for instance, is 66 million year cycle, and it's moving at 792,000 kilometers. Now, the size of the Earth in several, across multiple scales of measure, brings us to the number 66. But also, how much does the Earth weigh? Well, 66, and again, a whole bunch of 0 short tons. So the size of the Earth, the weight of the Earth. Now, 66 feet, 792 inches. 7,920 miles equatorial circumference of the Earth. Now, 792 million ionic fathom is the diameter of the Sun, and the Earth of 7,920 miles orbits the Sun at 66,000 miles per hour at its slowest point. 792 and 66. And just by sheer coincidence, 792 followed by 4 zeros is the diameter of the Earth in ionic cubits. So ionic fathom, ionic cubits, and the mile. And also canonical cubits just coincidentally combines to 66 and 5 zeros at the end, so defining the moon. But again, another coincidence, the description of New Jerusalem at 12,000 furlong just happens to convert at 792 followed by 40 feet. 792 Temple of Man, 792 the Earth, 792 the Moon, 792 the Sun, the speed of the solar system, and 792 inches being 66 feet. And this just happens to be at the ionic scale of measurements, the column of wisdom, which is also a musical mode. Now, so again, you can dismiss this as coincidence, but well, you know, what can I say about that? But anyway, so the roads themselves now, Chicago roads are either at 42 feet wide carriageway or at 44 feet. This is I went to in other videos as well. So on this one I'm just going to stick with the 42 feet wide carriageway and 12 feet wide sidewalks, footpaths we call them. Well, that's 144 inches. But what it does, it creates a... So the whole street, including the sidewalk, is 11 fathom wide. 66 feet is 11 fathom. The carriageway, just the road itself, is 42 feet wide or 7 fathom. So essentially what we have is a 7 and 11 ratio. And if you might ring a bell, because what do these proportions create? Well, they create something very special, and it's a standard form which I've been throughout this series and earlier series repeating once again. So let's just tip the carriageway or the road sideways, and so we have 11 wide and 7 high. And what do we have there? Well, again, we're going to see this in a moment. What we have is the profile or the cross section of the Great Pyramid, which in itself will bring us to pi proportions, to phi proportions, and so many other points. And this is one of the symphony of continuing interwoven, interlaced coincidence, as some might like to call it. But okay, so 7 over 11 is essentially pi over 2, 22 over 7 being the best description of pi in whole numbers. And so there we see the Great Pyramid, 280 Egyptian royal cubits high and 440 Egyptian royal cubits wide, a 7 over 11 ratio. Not only does that bring us 1.6181818, which we get pi from the Fibonacci sequence, we also will find several other connections and many other important proportions. So the Great Pyramid, IMP, the Louvre Pyramid in Paris, is a scale model of the Great Pyramid itself. Here we see Melancholia 1 by Albrecht Dürer, one of the most famous of these esoteric geometricians, artists as well. And this is also Cloud Gate in Chicago, otherwise known as the Bean. But throughout history, through these people who are neck deep in this type of knowledge and the Hermetic code, we see it consistently repeated, whether it be ancient Greco-Roman architecture, ancient Egyptian architecture, Renaissance architecture, Renaissance schools of knowledge. This proportion, which brings us close to a very enigmatic geometric construction of squaring the circle. And this, so just by coincidence, once more, another little bar in the symphony of coincidence is that it gives us proportions of the Earth and the Moon, as well as we shall see soon many other important astronomical connections. Again, it's all just coincidence. So where are we? Okay, Great Pyramid, Cloud Gate in Chicago. We're going to have a look at that any moment now. Just where are we going to? Okay, so we've seen Iowa, we've seen the state capital of Illinois, both by the same architects using essentially the same method, which has been repeated throughout all of America, state capitals, cathedrals, these really important buildings. And if we zoom into Chicago itself, and there is Cloud Gate, just next to Millennial Park, which in itself is been descended from the City Beautiful movement, which wasn't just about buildings, it was about creating a beautiful city. So parklands, the width of streets, all of this was part of the City Beautiful movement. And again, whether it's Washington, Chicago, Indianapolis, San Francisco, Winnipeg in Canada, so many other places have been touched by this school of knowledge. Now that might be, this was before World War One, so you might dismiss it as a relic of a earlier period. Well, Anish Kapoor, Cloud Gate, just like Arnaldo Pomodoro or Tony Rosenthal, these sculptors who get the plum jobs, the prime commissions, are working in this same methodology. So for instance, Cloud Gate, Chicago, 66 feet wide and 33 feet high. 66 feet is one Gunter's chain, 33 feet is one Rathbone chain. However, if you read the Wikipedia articles, they're going to give you a date which is at least 1,000 years after the well, actually closer to 3,500 years after the creation of these measures, because they go back to the ancient Indus civilizations, Egyptian civilizations, and you'll find them elsewhere used consistently throughout time, especially ancient Egypt throughout the periods up to Greco-Roman, Renaissance, and well up till now. And here's a classic example. But if we look at it from the side, Cloud Gate Chicago is 42 feet wide by 33 feet wide, which creates 14 over 11 proportion. So that half triangle of a Great Pyramid, where we get the 272727 proportion, as well as 1.6181818. So it's essentially just like the Louvre Pyramid or Melancholia 1 or the Great Pyramid, or so many of the other structures which encode this, whether through proportion or by measures. These exact same numbers reoccur again and again, and of course they can be traced back to the size of the Earth and the Moon, the beautiful geometry which emerges from the Great Pyramid, and it just again coalesces, comes together, bleeds back into each other. And to be frank, to call it coincidence is to be ignorant, to be ideological on an obscene level of ideology. And so I've done some videos. Other people, many people have been investigating this for centuries, and again, it's people like Metabunk, who wouldn't know, a pile of crap from Strawberry Sunday when it comes to these things, because they're ideologically minded. They have a mindset where anything which does not, if it's not on the first page Wikipedia, then therefore it's not true. It's really shocking. Especially that they portray themselves as somehow these scientifically enlightened people, which they are not. But so there we see just an animation to show how the proportion, so the base compared to the height of a Great Pyramid, brings us to this wonderful geometry in regards to just compass and straight edge geometry, and this in itself will lead to the and again so many other points. I'm just using the same tools to show you how they are repeated. Now this is by no means the end of it, this is only the introduction to it. So the geometry of the three-dimensional Great Pyramid gives us excellent two-dimensional geometry, as well as proportions again of the Earth and the Moon, Sun, Earth, Moon and stars being at the core of all these schools of knowledge. As above, so below. What's in the heavens, as above, so below. But what else does the Great Pyramid? Well, many other things. Okay, so but for instance, if you include the sockets, so not just the pyramid but the greater structure, include the sockets, and you stand at the corner. So the Great Pyramid is a three-dimensional object. You must observe it as a three-dimensional object. So we stand at the corner, we see the most, to base, or the most we can see. And if we multiply that by 86,400, what we get is the equatorial circumference of the Earth to a level of precision unrivaled until the last few decades and satellite technology. Now, it might even be argued because of the way that they measure the Earth, it's essential. They don't just take a snapshot and say that's it. They use a series of averages. So even the so-called perfect satellite measurements are actually imperfect. That's just usually stated because they don't understand how these measurements are taken. It's a series of averages. Now, if we include the socle or the paving stones on which the Great Pyramid stands, we multiply, so the height, including the socle, multiplied by that same number, 86,400, we get the height of the pyramid. It might be also interesting to note that the maximum visible base of a pyramid is the speed of the Earth per second, rotationally speaking, but the pyramid, not only does it define the polar diameter of the Earth, including the height, that includes the flattening of the Earth, because the Earth is not a perfect sphere, it's slightly flattened at the top, and the Great Pyramid just happens to encode these. Now, you can say, well, at any ratio, anything will sort of encode this. Well, no, it won't, because this is the height and the width. However, there's another layer to this, and that is the meter, the so-called alleged modern meter. The meter was not based on the size of the Earth. It goes back centuries before that, and it goes to seconds. Now, 1 meter was essentially how we defined a pendulum, which defined a second. Now, within that 30-degree arc, the 1 meter pendulum has, the length of that arc is exactly pi over 6 meters, or 1 Egyptian royal cubit, 86,400 seconds per day, the royal Egyptian cubit, which defines the pyramid itself. And, well, so many other aspects. For instance, 30 degrees is 108,000 seconds on the compass, or pi over 6 radian, as well as all this other information. The story regarding metric and imperial really is just so outlandishly wrong that, again, cringeworthy. Anish Kapoor, he's a modern sculptor, just like Arnaldo Pomodoro or Tony Rosenthal or some other people I've detailed. They get this in there. But anyway, 42 feet wide. If you've seen recent videos, especially the previous one I did in regards to Denver, well, both 33 feet, okay, talked about that, and 42 feet wide. This in itself is another one of the recurring themes throughout all of Hermetic architecture. Not just one or two examples, but many, many examples, and in the same places, both on the earlier periods up to the modern day. Now, for instance, the width of the US Air Force Academy Chapel in Colorado, well, apart from it, you can see 2953.125 and 295.3125. That was in the previous episode. I showed how that carries on throughout America, which this series has been on, but you also find it in so many other places, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, for instance. And this number is very special because it's a harmonic. It harmonizes the sun, earth, and moon, not just in natural cycles of time, but also naturally occurring scales of distance. So the same number, okay, and 42 feet wide as well, which is the how wide are the roadways in Chicago or Australia and all these other places? Well, they're 42 feet wide, as so is so many other points of architecture. And just to save time, I'm going to recycle some graphics I did from the last video, and that's from the US Air Force Academy. The Jewish Chapel, for instance, 42 feet wide. Michigan State Capitol, 420. Statue of Liberty, 42 feet wide hand, and Golden Gate Bridge, main span, 4,200 feet, 42 by 1, 42 by 10, 42 by 100. And there we see the direct conversions of that. Okay, sorry, this card's going to be repeated rather than stop and correct this. I just let again, because it's the width of the roads, it's the bridges, it's the statues, it's the buildings, it's constantly repeated. The New York series, for instance, yeah. Anyway, in regards to this, so many aspects of it, again, written into across cultures, across time, and written into so many forms in itself, that this particular number, the way it converts, will bring us to a whole series of knowledge. Geometric, the clock, the compass, sun, earth, moon, and stars, as well as many other points. For instance, the number 5040, arithmetic geometry, even 42 consecutive primes, which directly connects back to 42 feet. You get what I'm... Okay. Plato, 5,400, best number of citizens in a city. Platonic solids. Yeah, okay. Well, we're going to see that more. But again, this Cremona scale, which seems to have been erased from modern books, totally forgotten, but recorded in older encyclopedias. And, well, again, it will convert to exactly a set of numbers which will encode the same bloody thing, which is all over the place, all over time. And again, in this infinite sea of numbers, this can't happen. Anyway, I had to cut out a little bit of a rant, but once again, 12 yards, you're going to see same thing over and over again. In the infinite sea of numbers, in the supposedly randomness of this random world, this thing would not happen. To dismiss it as coincidence is really tinfoil hat stuff, because, well, it speaks for itself. 24, once more, the same pattern, same rhythm, same beautiful numbers which connect with so many other aspects across so many disciplines, especially the quadrivium. 48, once more, well, New Jerusalem, Ark of Utnapishtim, again, weights and measures, Eastern traditions crossing over to Western traditions, crossing over, well, especially to my favourite aspect of this being astronomy, as above, so below. So, but 42 feet wide, that was, I just recycled those cards. That's the same method built into Cloudgate Chicago, which is new, it's modern, it's not a relic of an earlier period, it's built in. But of course, if you on the Cremona scale, once more, this system which has fallen out of measure, so 108 hand on the Cremona scale, and 108 once more being a beautiful description of so many aspects, whether it's astronomy. Here we see multiple forms, especially the Vesica repeated once more. In geometry also, I should speak about it more, but the golden number, phi, how it crosses over again. So many aspects, so many disciplines, and consistently repeated throughout this whole methodology, both of older schools but also the modern school, even arithmetic and cross-dimensional numbers in pentatonic tuning, how 108, and again, whether it's 54, 64, 72, 96, 108, again, in the allegedly modern or recent scales of measure, but also connecting again back to ancient scales of weights and measure. And so the Greco-Roman died out, but then it was reintroduced. But it was actually never reintroduced. It was moved through time through the again, same systems, cathedrals, major public buildings, and of course they still use it in the modern electronic period, once more, 108 being an important defining number of the Ark of Utnapishtim, preserver of life, and New Jerusalem, which again, Eastern traditions, whether it's Hindu, Far Eastern, from the Far East, China, across again, whether it's measures, Shaolin, in Chinese literature, and also in Buddhism and Buddhist tradition. Again, this is a key number. And also, well, the yugas. So, for instance, the Treta Yuga, 1,296,000 years, 1,296,000 seconds in the compass, breaks down in 108. And the Satya Yuga, 1728, which again 144, 144 palm on the Cremona scale. And so whether it's the very recent Air Force Academy Chapel, or the Golden Gate Bridge, or the Michigan State Capitol, or basically every structure which is even loosely connected to the esoteric world, especially with connections to Freemasons. I must repeat, it's not Freemasons didn't invent this. They are part of a legacy of a much older stream of knowledge. As we can see, it's from the east to the west, spanning the last 4,000 plus years of history. And again, multiple disciplines. So, for instance, Rosicrucians incorporated in octaves, but also in elements. So chemistry / alchemy, because alchemy and chemistry are the same thing. There's just basically an arbitrary date separating them. 144, once more, Ark of Utnapishtim, New Jerusalem, as well as a repeated theme throughout the Bible. And again, these sacred texts, these ancient texts, there's the whole moralizing sort of my God's better than your God, but all of them incorporate the same sets of very specific numbers. 432, the Yugas, New Jerusalem, Ark of Utnapishtim, Sun, ancient weights and measures. Once, again, 576, we see it in Mayan, we see it in modern screen resolution, we see it also being a conversion point of the sun. And this is the power of it. It's about harmonics, harmony between multiple forms, multiple disciplines, all coalescing around a very narrow, a very specific set of very important numbers. All is number, all is mind, all is consciousness has emerged from the Pythagorean schools. Mentioned earlier, 1296 yugas, sun, earth, and even the sun and moon and the compass, and so much more. So this is Chicago street widths, but it's here in Sydney, it's here in other parts of the world, and that Anish Kapoor and his cloud gate, which dominates, very important. It's not just some random little sculpture on the edge of town. It's one of the defining points of the city. Now, it's not just the height, the width, and the length of it. It's also the arch, 144 inches, the same as the sidewalks in Chicago, and the omphalos, or the navel, 27 feet high. Now, once more, I'm just going to, rather than make new graphics for it, I'm just going to recycle from an earlier video of a series I did on Winnipeg, the Pool of the Black Star, which has all these other aspects to it, the Tuscan columns being related to hearing, and also that the Pool of the Black Star is a echo chamber, a whispering chamber. Now, for instance, so this applies to Cloudgate in Chicago, but I'm just recycling. 9 yards, 9 being so important. Now this is I've updated this because there's so much regarding that. Now 9's a little bit low on the number scale, so you're going to find stuff there. But as we move up, so by the time we get to like 108, 324, 432, we're now talking about a broad span of numbers with a lot in between, and in the randomness of which we've been indoctrinated in. Why isn't it 113 palm or so forth? Because they've chosen these very specific sets of numbers around these very specific set of measures, which so wonderfully connect and harmonize with ancient forms of weights and measure, well before the Greco-Roman period. I just focus on those a little bit because the records and the is so strong, and well, again, okay, 36, the moon, the compass, Mayan calendars, arithmetic, geometry, so therefore astronomy, arithmetic, and it's all over now. 81's a very lovely one as well, because it's another beautiful example of the harmony built into the heavens. So the ratio of mass from Earth to Moon, 81. Ratio of speed, because the Moon orbits the Earth, so it's moving faster through space, and that's at a ratio of 81. Now I'm going to put an asterisk on that one, because that's from Peter Plichka. I haven't done the run the numbers myself, so to speak, but I've seen it in enough places to have at least some sort of faith in it. Now, we went through 108 before, and again, of these beautiful, of these noble, princely numbers, 108 is high in the order of things. So again, not just in modern, not just in ancient, but from east to west. And again, sort of because we covered it before, but how can it be that these methods have been passed on if it wasn't through some system, if it wasn't through these secret, don't like to say it, but yet, well, they are secret societies or open societies with secrets. And because, well, you look at Giordano Bruno and other people who were burned at the stake for heresy. This is one of the reasons why secrecy has been incorporated in it, because Giordano Bruno wasn't the first. Hypatia back in was it the 3rd, 2nd century, she was killed by the mob for suggesting the heliocentric model. It's very dangerous to have knowledge. And so again, the cloud gate in Chicago, it's not just the height, not just the width, not just the length, it's the height of the arch, it's the omphalos or the navel. Navel gazing is an old form of meditation. You'll see old Greek statues where they're looking at their belly button, their navel, which was a form of meditation at the time. So again, omphalos, just a connection. And of course 66 feet wide, if we go just to repeat once more how this method is continued. And just a reminder, 66 feet allegedly invented by Edmund Gunter and commissioned by Queen Elizabeth, contemporary of John Dee, all very occult, all very esoteric, and that these people, these themes, these numbers carry through is absolute proof of that this is a method. It's not coincidence. Okay, but City Beautiful movement, Daniel Burnham, I did a video on New York and the Flatiron Building, and apart from many other aspects, it includes symbolism. But what's interesting is that, I think, anyway, Daniel Burnham, he designed the Chicago Masonic building, which has now been demolished. I won't go into the measures, but there's no guessing for what they are, because again, they will connect to so many other points. But the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Scranton, Pennsylvania, was designed by Raymond Hood. Now, once more, just like Daniel Burnham, at least there's no record of Raymond Hood being a Mason, and he designed a Scottish Rite Cathedral, which seems to be a pattern of those which I've looked into. Scottish Rite cathedrals seem to be designed by non-Masons, which just as a point of interest. But Raymond Hood is important because he was the architect of 30 Rockefeller Center resplendent in the Hermetic code through symbolism, so many other points. And okay, I have to set up the next set of pictures. Okay, so the Rockefeller Center by 30 Rockefeller Center by Raymond Hood. The whole Rockefeller Center, Atlas, Prometheus, Hermes, the zodiac sign, of course, there, and we have the Pegasus, the constellation, also the eagle representing Zeus. Most importantly, we have the great architect here in 30 Rock. Wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of our times. Now that comes from Isaiah 33, and it's been slightly revised, and I think to the benefit of it. But even if you see the arc created by the compass, which held by the great architect. So 30 Rockefeller Center as a whole, again, incorporates this system. Now, Raymond Hood, of course, mentioned, he designed the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Scranton, Pennsylvania. While we're in Pennsylvania, the Capitol building, 272 feet high. I've spoken before about the Colorado Capitol building by Elijah Myers, who's very important. He did 3 of the Capitol buildings. He's a hermeticist, there's another way to put it. 272 feet, but so is the Georgia State Capitol, which has a statue of Athena on it. But while we're there, so I'm just going to skip through these because, well, it's the same repeated over again, the same symbols, architecture, even trace for people, the money, the cornerstones, all these sorts of things. Now, the Pennsylvania Capitol, art, science, so we have these, the figures inside, the design, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, just again one of these outstanding pieces, beautiful pieces of architecture and craftsmanship. For instance, like science, art being one of the figures around the side. There are more to it. For instance, the chamber's 120 by 90 feet, all this type of stuff. But we're in Pennsylvania and Quakertown, Pennsylvania, where we will find the Pyramid Healthcare. Now, if you jump on Google Maps, have a look at where Quakertown, look at the name of the streets, dead giveaway. Now, this we also have this enigmatic pyramid here, and I'll put the link in the description because there's a video here by Phenomenal Travel Videos, and he visited this site. Now I wouldn't, yeah. Anyway, he visited there. I'll put the link in the description where you can see his interpretation of it, which might be quite different from mine. But multiple little pyramids are around. So it's not just this pyramid itself, it's also other pyramids around. The street names you'll find this, and Pyramid Healthcare. This is, well, it's Masonic, but there's also very strong Rosicrucian connections throughout Quakertown. And as we have a look inside here, you also see this, some of the emblems. And for instance, there above the door, the anchor, the flame, the winged a sphere, the skull and bones. Now, especially the wings, this is a funerary symbols. Now, there's a lot of hocus pocus in regards to these, but you'll still find them in, gravestones and stuff till now. Even non-Masonic, it's their standard funerary symbols in the Christian world. But the interesting point is tri. Now, this is an old Masonic illustration, and again, so try. What can I add to that? Try. You must try, put some effort into these things, and that's, again, connects with the secrecy. But also on the inside, you'll see some of these emblems. Now, underneath that particular pyramid, you'll see the snake around about that T. That's got to do with the brazen serpent and Moses. And again, I must emphasize that unfortunately the internet is flooded with, well, very reactionary, very, I wouldn't even say poorly researched, I would say non-research. It's basically just, unfortunately, people like Alex Jones, Ike, Mark Dice, their bullshit just gets repeated over and over and over again. And, well, you know, especially if you actually spend some time to read up and look at the history of these organizations, especially before the 1930s, you will find that the absolute opposite, of what is spoken of is true. But back to Chicago, the Cloudgate sculpture. Now, because of the numbers involved, now some people are going to say, like, Babylonian mystery schools, evil, satanic, blah blah blah. It's actually containing knowledge, and if you're the opponent of knowledge, you are a fool. You are a bloody fool. And now, I myself was captured by the bullshit of these gurus who know nothing, who promote non-researched, complete lack of knowledge. But anyway, I have to say that because it's, by liberating myself of the bullshit, I started to see that there's actually not only the architecture but the social history in regards to these things as well. Where did the US Constitution come from? Where was the Australian Constitution? Where was constitutional government and the opposition to the divine right of kings and priests emerge from? It didn't just sprout out of the ground. It come out of groups such as Oddfellows, Rosicrucians, Freemasons. This is not secret history where you need to interpret it and read between the lines. It's pure, you know, it's there, it's on record. And again, unfortunately, nut jobs, for-profit gurus, all these type of people are spreading misinformation. And unfortunately, if you scream satanic, satanic, satanic long enough, you get a big enough audience, and then if you tell a lie enough times, it becomes the accepted truth around there. And well, you know, these people are bogus. Anyway, so this is the Chicago Tribune Tower by Raymond Hood. He did the 30 Rockefeller Center. He did the Scranton Scottish Rite Cathedral and other points. And we'll just have a look again because it incorporates the same system, same architects, same organisation, same money, bringing in this. And okay, while we're here, rather than stop it and go back, there we see sort of some of the parks in Chicago which emerge from the City Beautiful movement. Because that's what's a beautiful city. That was what was about: beautiful buildings, beautiful cities, about creating a more open lifestyle for everyone, not just for the few. And anyway, Chicago Tribune building by Raymond Hood. Well, what are we going to find? We're going to find exactly what we found everywhere else. Another interesting fact about the Chicago Tribune building for Australians especially is that one of the proposed designs, almost identical, was by Walter Burley Griffin, but as it will connect to other structures, so for instance it's 3 times as high as the base of the Statue of Liberty, or at a 2-to-3 ratio of the Texas Capitol by Elijah Myers, or the San Francisco City Hall. So you'll see, so even though they're not exactly, well, they are built on the same scale. This is a recurring theme, and once more, the same themes incorporated through them, especially through the Cremona scale, and 273, 4375, well, it's also scaled to the Georgia Guidestones, for instance, and in future episodes I'll be revisiting this number, 2734375, because again you'll find it in so many of the buildings, and it's a number which describes the relationship of Earth, Moon and Stars, or the sidereal month. So 2953 mentioned earlier, the Synodic Month, Sun, Earth and Moon. 273 is the Earth, Moon and Stars. So between them we get the 2 months, the Synodic Month and the sidereal month. Also descriptions of Sun, Earth, Moon and Stars, and this particular number is so beautiful, but also because of a reflection throughout history in regards to weights and measures, but also natural cycles in especially Sun, Earth, Moon and the stars as well. It truly is one of the most harmonizing numbers in regards to natural cycles, and it's one of the underpinnings of the systems of weights and measures which have been passed on through ancient times. Now, 27.3 grams is the Indus ounce, 27.3 grams is the ancient Egyptian ounce, 27.3 grams is the Greco-Roman ounce, 27.3 grams is the Spanish doubloons, 27.3 grams is the US silver dollar, and so many other points. It's written in weights and measures recorded from the beginning of official the official beginnings of civilization right up unto this present date, and again it's a merging of the imperial and the metric once more, just like with the Great Pyramid, the second, and the pendulum. Okay, so that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. The Hermetic Code, same but different all the time. All these buildings are different heights, different widths, different lengths, but they're all the same architects, same organizations, same symbols throughout history, going back to the beginning of official history to now. People such as Rosicrucians, Oddfellows, Freemasons, Buffaloes, the Druids and other esoteric groups have passed it on in their architecture, in their symbols, and it's been passed on in a semi-secretive sense because of the deadly nature of it in other times. And unfortunately we're re-entering, and again it's like the boiling frog, we don't see it, that we're re-entering this very dangerous period of history where religious dogma and extremism is becoming acceptable. People defend it. People are literally defending extremism and fundamentalism. It's crazy, it's dangerous, and this is the importance why it must be preserved. And with that anyway, I hope you enjoyed and have a good one. I'll do a few more episodes of this series, and please remember, the truth shall make you free.